I died holding my sister's frozen body. Now I'm back in high school, and the apocalypse starts tomorrow. The cold didn't kill me. That's what everyone gets wrong about freezing to death. They think you drift off gentle, like falling asleep in snow. They think it's peaceful. It's not. It's fire in your lungs first, burning, screaming, your body eating itself for warmth. Then the shaking, violent enough to crack teeth. Then numbness, which should be relief, but isn't, because numbness means dying. Means your blood is thickening, your organs are slowing, your heart is preparing for its last beat. Then, finally, the sleep. I held my sister through all of it. Minji was 7. She'd stopped crying hours ago, which was worse than the crying. She just looked at me with those big eyes, our mother's eyes, and whispered, "Appa, I'm tired," in a voice so small it barely existed. "Don't sleep," I begged her. "Minji, please, don't sleep." She slept anyway. I held her for another hour, maybe 2. Time stops meaning anything when the world is ending. I felt her grow cold against my chest, felt the last warmth leave her body and join the endless winter outside our broken shelter. Her little hands. I remember her little hands, curled into fists, frozen solid. I tried to warm them with my breath, but my breath was cold too by then. Everything was cold. The shelter was a convenience store we'd broken into during the second week of the freeze. The first week, we'd stayed home. Dad said the government would fix things, would send help, would do something. But the government collapsed on day 4. The military dissolved on day 6. By day 10, we were alone. Mom died on day 12. She gave Minji her blanket and said she wasn't cold, wasn't hungry, wasn't anything. She lied. We all lied. But Minji believed her, and that was what mattered. Dad died on day 15. He went out looking for food and never came back. I told Minji he was getting help. I told her he'd be back soon. I told her until I couldn't tell her anything anymore. After that, it was just us. Me and Minji, moving through frozen streets, searching for warmth that didn't exist. We found the convenience store on day 19. Canned food. Bottled water. A space behind the counter that blocked some of the wind. We lasted 12 more days. 12 days of eating cold beans from cans. 12 days of huddling together for warmth that never came. 12 days of watching Minji fade, little by little, until she was just eyes and bones and that terrible trust that her appa would save her. I didn't save her. I held her while she died. That's all I did. Then I closed my eyes and the cold took me too. I woke to warmth. Warm sunlight. Golden, gentle, alive sunlight streaming through a window I didn't recognize. I sat up gasping, hands flying to my chest, warm, moving, beating, and looked around in utter confusion. My bedroom. My bedroom. The one I'd had since I was 13, before the world ended, before everything. Posters on the walls, BTS, because Minji loved them and I pretended not to. Textbooks on the desk, open to a page I'd never finished. My phone charging on the nightstand, displaying a date I couldn't process. September 3rd. 3 months before the first freeze. 3 months before the temperature dropped to minus 150 degrees Celsius and stayed there. 3 months before Minji died in my arms. I stared at the date for a full minute, waiting for it to change, waiting for reality to reassert itself. It didn't. I stumbled out of bed, legs weak, heart pounding. The hallway was the same, familiar photos on the walls, familiar creaky floorboard near the bathroom. I threw open the door to Minji's room. She was there, 7 years old, tucked in bed with her stuffed rabbit, hair spread across the pillow like a dark halo. Breathing. Alive. I sank to my knees beside her bed and cried. Minji woke up to find her older brother sobbing on her floor. She was confused, then scared, then confused again. She patted my head the way I'd patted hers 1,000 times. "Appa, did you have a bad dream?" I looked up at her, alive, warm, real, and pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked. "Yeah, I managed. The worst dream. But I'm okay now." She hugged me back because she was 7 and forgiving and hadn't yet learned that some dreams don't go away when you wake up. "Want to have breakfast with me?" she asked. Mom's making pancakes. Pancakes. My mom making pancakes. In a kitchen that wasn't frozen. With ingredients that existed. Sure, I said. Pancakes sound perfect. That first day was a blur. I went through the motions, ate pancakes, went to school, sat in classes I'd already taken in a life that supposedly hadn't happened yet. Teachers droned about trigonometry and Korean history. Students whispered about tests and relationships and all the tiny dramas that consumed teenagers who didn't know the world was ending. I watched them all with new eyes. There was Sujin, who'd been mean to Minji once. In the freeze, I'd found her frozen solid outside a collapsed building, still reaching for help that never came. There was Young-ho, who'd bullied me for years. In the freeze, he'd saved 3 children before dying himself. I never got to thank him. There was Teacher Park, who'd given me detention for sleeping in class. In the freeze, she'd shared her last food with strangers and asked nothing in return. Everyone was different when you knew how they died. Everyone was more. And everyone was going to die again, unless I did something. The first week, I thought I was crazy. I checked the news obsessively, looking for any sign, whether anomalies, strange atmospheric readings, something that would confirm the apocalypse was coming. Nothing. Just the usual chaos of a world that didn't know it had 3 months left. Political scandals, celebrity gossip, sports highlights. I watched my family, like a ghost at their own funeral. Dad going to work at his boring office job, complaining about his boring boss, completely unaware that in 90 days, none of it would matter. Mom making dinner, nagging me about homework, asking if I'd talk to that nice girl Hannah for my class. Minji doing homework at the kitchen table, struggling with math she'd never need, laughing at cartoons she'd never see finish. They laughed. They argued. They lived, totally ignorant of the future rushing toward them. How do you tell people that? How do you walk into a classroom and look at classmates who bullied you, ignored you, never knew you existed, and know they'll all be dead by Christmas? How do you sit across from your father and not scream, "We should have gone south, we should have stockpiled supplies, we should have done something, anything," when he doesn't even know there's a problem? I couldn't. So, I did nothing. For 2 weeks, I did absolutely nothing except watch the calendar count down and wait for the madness to pass. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe I'd hit my head. Maybe the cold had taken my sanity before my life, and this was all some elaborate hallucination before the end. Then Minji climbed into my bed one night, scared of thunder, and pressed her cold little feet against my legs. Cold. She was cold. And I remembered, with absolute, horrifying clarity, the feeling of her body stiffening in my arms. The weight of her death. The silence that followed. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't madness. This was real. And if I didn't act, my sister would die again. The next morning, I started planning. Not big plans. I couldn't exactly walk into the principal's office and announce the apocalypse. But small things. Things I could control. I emptied my savings account. Only about 300,000 won, maybe $250, but enough for basic supplies. I bought thermal blankets from different stores so no one would notice. Hand warmers by the box. Waterproof matches. Canned food that wouldn't spoil. I hid everything in a box under my bed, then moved it to a locker at school when my mom got suspicious. I studied maps obsessively. Online, in books, in my head. I identified geothermal plants that might retain heat. Underground bunkers from old wars. Remote mountain caves that could shelter small groups. Places where survivors had gathered in the last timeline, and places they'd avoided because the cold found them anyway. I also started watching people differently. The kids at school. Their faces. Their futures. Which ones would survive the first week? Which ones would betray their friends for warmth? Which ones would I find frozen, eyes open, reaching for help that never came? I knew because I'd seen it. All of it. The 3-year winter that killed everyone eventually. But this time, I had something I didn't have before. Time. 3 months. 12 weeks. 87 days to save my sister, my family, maybe even the world. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was more than 0. More than last time. And I was going to use every single second. By week 3, I had a problem. My parents noticed the changes. Mom found one of the thermal blankets under my bed, the one I'd forgotten to move, and demanded explanations. Dad sat me down for one of those conversations parents have when they think you're doing drugs or joining a cult. Jin-ho, he said carefully, your mother is worried. We both are. These past few weeks, you've been different. Distant. You barely talk to us. You're not seeing friends. You spend all your time on that computer. And now these. He gestured at the blanket. What's going on, son? What could I say? Hi Dad. In 3 months the temperature will drop to negative 150 degrees Celsius, and everyone we know will freeze to death. I know because I lived through it. I held Minji while she died. So I'm preparing, asterisk.
Right.
That would go over well. I've been reading about climate change, I said instead. Extreme weather events. I just think we should be prepared. Dad's face softened with relief and pity. He thought I was anxious, nervous. A teenager with too much internet access and not enough real-world experience. Jin-ho, it's good to be aware. But this kind of preparation? It's excessive. You're scaring your sister. Minji, who'd climbed into my bed every night since I'd returned, seeking warmth I couldn't explain. Who'd started having nightmares she couldn't describe. Who looked at me sometimes like she remembered, which was impossible, but haunted me anyway. I'm not trying to scare anyone, I said quietly. I'm trying to keep us safe. Dad sighed. Safe from what? I couldn't answer. Not honestly.
So I lied.
Promised to ease up. Apologized for worrying them. And moved the rest of my supplies to school the next day.
The whispers started after that.
Kids at school noticed the changes. The way I flinched at cold drinks. The way I stared out windows at perfectly normal weather, like I was watching a storm approach. The way I'd stopped caring about grades, popularity, any of the things that consume normal teenagers. You hear about Jin-ho? They whispered in hallways. Total freak now. His mom told my mom he's hoarding emergency supplies. Think he's on something? Probably just cracked. You know his family's always been weird. I let them talk. Words couldn't hurt me anymore. I'd heard worse. The screams of dying neighbors, the silence of frozen cities, my sister's final whisper. But one person wouldn't let it go.
Hannah.
I don't know what Hannah was. In my first life, we barely spoke. She sat 2 rows over in homeroom, always reading, always quiet. I knew her name. Nothing more. But after I returned, she started watching me. Not the way others watched, with suspicion or amusement. She watched like she was studying me, like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then one day after school, she cornered me by the lockers. You know something, she said. No greeting. No small talk. Just that. I played dumb. Know something about what? The cold. Her eyes held mine, steady and unnerving. You're preparing for something. Something specific. And every time someone mentions winter, you get this look, like you're somewhere else. Somewhere bad. My heart hammered. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I've been having dreams, nightmares, about freezing, about watching people die, about... She stopped, swallowing hard. About a girl, 7 years old, dark hair, calling for her brother. Minji. The name stuck in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Hannah's eyes widened. You know her. You know who she is. I don't. Don't lie to me. Her voice cracked. I've seen things, Jin-ho. Things that don't make sense. Weather that shouldn't exist. Cities buried in ice. And you're in every dream. Trying to save people.
Failing.
Trying again. Trying again. Trying again. Who are you? I whispered. She shook her head. I don't know. But I think I'm like you. Whatever happened to you, I think it happened to me too. That night, we talked for hours. We sat on the school rooftop, watching stars that didn't know they'd soon be hidden by endless clouds, and we shared our impossible truths. Hannah remembered dying alone in an apartment, surrounded by frozen strangers she'd tried to help. She remembered 3 years of survival, scavenging, hiding, running from others who'd become desperate enough to kill. She remembered the end, a fever she couldn't treat, a body too weak to fight, a last breath that tasted like ice. Then she woke up in September, in her own bed, with her parents alive and her little brother still laughing and the whole terrible future waiting to happen again. "I thought I was crazy," she admitted. "I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. But then I saw you, the way you moved, the way you looked at the sky, and I knew. I just knew. Why me? There could be others. There are. I've found 3 more. Middle schoolers mostly. 1 elementary teacher. They all remember. They all saw the freeze." She met my eyes. "We're not alone, Jinho. There are dozens of us. Maybe hundreds. Maybe more. Hundreds of people who remembered dying. Hundreds of people with knowledge of what was coming. Hundreds of people who could help or who could panic, fragment, make everything worse. What do we do?" I asked. Hannah's answer was simple. "We find them all. We organize. We prepare. And when the freeze comes, we're ready." The next weeks were a blur of secret meetings and careful recruitment. Hannah was better at this than me. She had a quiet intensity that made people trust her, a way of listening that made them feel heard. I was the strategist, the one who remembered where survivors had gathered and where they died, the one who could look at a map and see the future. Together, we built a network. It started small. The middle schoolers Hannah had found, plus a few others we identified through careful observation. Kids who flinched at cold drinks. Kids who hoarded supplies. Kids who looked at winter forecasts like they were reading death sentences. We met in parks, in empty classrooms, in the basement of a church whose pastor had also returned and offered sanctuary. We shared memories, compared timelines, built a picture of what was coming. The freeze would start on December 15th. Not gradually, but suddenly, one day autumn, the next day minus 50 degrees Celsius. The first week would kill 90% of the population. The next 3 years would kill most of the rest. Survival depended on 3 things: shelter, supplies, and community. We needed all 3. By mid-November, our network had grown to 47 people. Mostly teenagers, but also that pastor, a convenience store owner, a retired military officer who'd survived the first freeze only to die in the second year. The military officer, Sergeant Kim, he insisted, became our de facto leader. He was in his 60s, sharp-eyed and soft-spoken, with a calm that made everyone feel safer. "I've seen war," he told us at our first real meeting. "I've seen what people do when they're scared. The freeze will be worse than any war. But we have something soldiers don't usually have. Warning. Use it." He taught us basics: how to layer clothing for maximum warmth, how to purify water without electricity, how to spot hypothermia before it killed. He helped us identify locations that might survive the freeze: underground parking structures, subway tunnels, military bunkers from old conflicts. One location stood out: an old military installation in the mountains, built during the Cold War, designed to withstand nuclear attack. It had geothermal heating, its own water supply, enough space for hundreds. "It's abandoned now," Sergeant Kim said. "But if we can get there before the freeze, if we can secure it and stock it, then we have a chance," Hannah finished. It became our goal, our obsession, our only hope. I hadn't told my parents anything. Every day, I carried the weight of the future while pretending everything was normal. Every meal, every conversation, every casual moment was a lie. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I laughed when I wanted to cry. I hugged Minji goodnight, knowing that in another timeline, I'd held her dead body. It was destroying me. Hannah noticed. Of course she noticed. She was the only one who really saw me anymore. "You need to tell them," she said one night, as we organized supplies in the church basement. "You can't keep carrying this alone." "And say what?" "Hey, Mom and Dad, the world ends in a month. Also, I'm from the future. Also, your daughter died in my arms." Yes. She met my eyes. Exactly that. Because they love you. Because they'll believe you if you say it right. Because if you don't, they'll die the same way they died before, confused, scared, wondering why their son didn't warn them. I wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons it was impossible, dangerous, foolish. But she was right. She was always right. I told them on a Sunday evening, after Minji was in bed. Mom was reading. Dad was watching news about unusual weather patterns, the first hints of what was coming, though no one recognized them yet. I sat down across from them, hands shaking, and started talking. I told them everything. The freeze. The 3 years. Mom's death on day 12. Dad's disappearance on day 15. Minji in my arms, growing cold, whispering, "Appa, I'm tired." I told them about waking up in September with memories of a future that hadn't happened yet. About Hannah and the others. About the bunker in the mountains. About our only chance. When I finished, silence filled the room. Mom was crying. Dad stared at the wall. Face pale, jaw tight. "Jin-ho," he finally said. "That's insane." "I know." I met his eyes. "But you've seen the news. The weather. The forecasts that keep getting worse. Scientists don't understand it. Governments don't understand it. But I do. Because I lived it." More silence. Then Mom crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. "I believe you," she whispered. "I don't understand it. But I believe you." Dad took longer. He was practical, skeptical, trained to question everything. But he'd also noticed my changes, the supplies, the distance, the fear in my eyes when winter was mentioned. "If you're right," he finally said, "what do we do?" I told him about the bunker, about Sergeant Kim's plan, about the window of opportunity we had before the freeze made travel impossible. Dad nodded slowly. "Then we go. All of us. And we take as many people as we can." Just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. The snow came early. December 3rd. 12 days before the freeze in my memory. I woke to Minji shaking me, eyes wide.
"Appa."
Snow. I looked out the window. White flakes drifted down from a sky that should have been clear. Not many, just a dusting, but enough. Too early. I grabbed my phone. Messages from Hannah, from Sergeant Kim, from half our network. Asterisk, did you see? It's starting. It's early, asterisk. The timeline had changed. That day, everything accelerated. Schools closed early because of unusual weather. Parents kept children home. Stores sold out of warm clothing, portable heaters, emergency supplies. The news cycled between reassuring statements and panic speculation. Our network went into overdrive. "We move now," Sergeant Kim ordered. "Not in 2 weeks.
Now."
The freeze could come any day. We'd prepared for this. Packed bags, arranged transportation, established rendezvous points. But knowing and doing were different things. Watching my parents load our car with supplies, watching Minji clutch her stuffed rabbit and ask worried questions, it felt like a dream. A nightmare. A repetition of everything I'd tried to prevent. The drive to the mountain bunker took 6 hours through worsening weather. Snow fell heavier as we climbed, the roads growing slick, visibility dropping. Other cars passed us, some heading the same direction, most just trying to reach home before conditions worsened. We made it. The bunker was everything Sergeant Kim promised. Hidden, solid, waiting. Old military equipment still functioned. Geothermal systems still hummed. Bunk rooms could sleep hundreds. Our group arrived in waves over the next 2 days. 47 became 63, then 81, then over 100. Families, children, elderly, the strong and the weak, and the ones who'd need extra help. We organized, assigned roles, stocked supplies, prepared for the long winter ahead. Then, on December 7th, the temperature dropped to -60 degrees Celsius in 6 hours. The freeze had begun. The first month was chaos. Over 100 people in close quarters, scared and grieving and uncertain. Families who'd lost loved ones in the initial freeze. Children crying for grandparents who hadn't made it. Adults arguing over supplies, over space, over who got the warmest sleeping spots. Sergeant Kim kept order with calm authority and a military background that commanded respect. Hannah organized the younger survivors into work crews. I did what I'd always done. Watched, remembered, advised. We established routines. Wake at 7 a.m. Breakfast at 8. Work assignments from 9 to 12. Lunch. More work. Dinner. Evening activities, games, stories, quiet conversations to keep spirits up. Lights out at 10. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. But it was survival. Minji adapted better than I expected. She made friends with other children, played games in the corridors, asked fewer questions about when we could go home. Sometimes I caught her watching me with those two big eyes, and I wondered what she remembered, what she knew. One night, she crawled into my bunk and pressed her cold feet against my legs, a habit she'd never lost. "Appa," she whispered. "Are we safe here?" I held her close. "As safe as we can be." "Will the cold find us?"
No.
I kissed her forehead. "The cold can't find us here. We're too deep, too warm, too together." She nodded, satisfied, and fell asleep in my arms. I stayed awake, listening to the wind howl above us, and prayed I was telling the truth. Not everyone handled bunker life well. Mr. Park, a father who'd lost his wife in the freeze, grew increasingly volatile. He argued with anyone about anything. He hoarded supplies. He muttered about the returnees and how we'd brought this disaster with our impossible memories. Others shared his suspicion. We tried to keep our origins quiet, but secrets spread in close quarters. Soon everyone knew. Some of us had lived through this before. Some of us remembered dying. "You knew," Mr. Park accused me one day, cornering me in a corridor. "You knew this would happen and you didn't warn everyone. You only saved yourselves." We tried to warn people. No one believed. Not hard enough. His face twisted. "My wife is dead because you didn't try hard enough. Because you were too busy saving your own family." I had no answer. What could I say? He was right. I hadn't tried hard enough. I'd been scared, uncertain, paralyzed by the weight of knowledge. But Hannah, appearing beside me, had plenty to say. "He was 17, she told Mr. Park coldly. 17 years old, carrying memories of watching his sister die, trying to figure out how to save anyone at all. What did you do at 17? What would you have done with the weight of the world on your shoulders?" Mr. Park stared at her, then at me, then walked away without another word. I turned to Hannah. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." She met my eyes. "You carry enough guilt without adding his." We all did what we could. That has to be enough. By February, supplies were running low. We'd stockpiled well, but over 100 people consumed resources faster than anticipated. Food, medicine, fuel, all dwindling. We needed more. Someone had to go to the surface. Sergeant Kim organized an expedition, 6 volunteers, including himself, to travel to a nearby town and scavenge supplies. I volunteered immediately. "No," he said. "You're too valuable here. You remember things the rest of us don't." "That's exactly why I should go. I know where survivors cache supplies in the last timeline. I know which areas are safe and which aren't." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded.
Fine.
"But you follow orders. No heroics." The surface was worse than I remembered. Temperatures hovered around -80 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds. We wore every layer we had, plus military-grade gear Sergeant Kim had stored in the bunker. Even so, the cold seeped through.
Bit into bones.
Reminded us constantly of what waited outside. The town was a ghost. Buildings buried in snow. Cars frozen solid. Bodies, too many bodies frozen in final positions, reaching for help that never came. We moved quickly, efficiently, hitting locations I remembered from before. A hardware store with camping supplies. A pharmacy with medicines. A supermarket with canned goods frozen but intact. On the 3rd day, we found survivors. They were in a church basement, 23 people, huddled around a wood stove, surviving on melted snow and dwindling supplies. When they saw us, some cried. Some screamed. Some reached for weapons they barely had strength to hold. "We're not here to hurt you," Sergeant Kim announced, hands raised. "We have shelter, warmth,
Food.
Come with us." They didn't trust us. Why would they? The freeze had turned everyone into potential enemies. But eventually, cold and hunger won. They followed us back to the bunker, adding 23 more souls to our community. Among them was a girl my age. She had dark hair and hollow eyes and a way of moving that reminded me of someone. "Jinho," she said when she saw me. "Park Jinho." I stared at her. "Do I know you? We had class together. Before." She swallowed. "You probably don't remember me." I was quiet. "But I remember you. You were different. Even before the freeze, you were different." Different. She meant the way I'd prepared. The way I'd known. "You're one of us," I said. "A returnee." She nodded. "I died in the first year. Froze in my apartment. Then I woke up in September, just like you." Tears filled her eyes. I tried to warn people. My parents. My friends. No one believed me. And now you're here. I put a hand on her shoulder. "That's what matters. You're here." Her name was Yijin. She became one of us, one of the core group who remembered, who planned, who carried the weight of 2 timelines. More survivors meant more problems. Food dwindled faster. Space grew tighter. Factions formed. Returnees versus non-returnees. Families versus singles. Those who'd been here from the start versus newcomers. Mr. Park, still grieving, became a leader of the anti-returnee faction. He argued that we'd brought the freeze somehow, that our impossible memories were a curse, that we should be separated from the others for safety. It was nonsense, but scared people believe nonsense. "You're not one of us," he told me publicly at a community meeting. "You're something else. Something that doesn't belong." "I belong here as much as anyone," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "I've survived the same freeze, lost the same people, grieved the same grief. But you knew. You knew and you didn't stop it." "I couldn't stop it. No one could. But I'm trying to help us survive it." Isn't that enough? It wasn't enough for him. It would never be enough. But others listened. Others saw the work we did, organizing, planning, remembering, and recognized its value. For now, we held together. Minji started having nightmares. Not unusual, given everything. But these were different. She'd wake screaming about cold, about darkness, about being alone. She'd cling to me and whisper things that made my blood freeze. "I remember, Appa. I remember being so cold. I remember you holding me. I remember." She'd stop, tears streaming. "I remember dying." I held her, heart shattering. "You didn't die. You're here. You're alive." "But I remember." "How can I remember if it didn't happen?" I had no answer. I told Hannah about it. She was quiet for a long moment then. Maybe she's like us. Maybe she came back too. She was 7. She died at 7. If she came back, then she remembers. Just like we do. Hannah's eyes were sad. "You can't protect her from that, Jinho. You can only be there for her." So I was. Every night, when she woke screaming, I held her. Every day, when she asked impossible questions, I answered as honestly as I could. I told her about the other timeline, the cold, the shelter, the end. I told her I loved her then, and loved her now, and would always love her. She listened.
She cried.
She held me back. And slowly, the nightmares faded. Spring never came. By March, temperatures should have risen. They didn't. By April, we should have seen signs of thaw. We didn't. By May, it became clear. The freeze wasn't a one-time event. It was the new normal. Our bunker could last years, but not forever. Supplies would eventually run out. Morale would eventually crumble. We needed a long-term solution. Sergeant Kim called a meeting of the core group. The old records mentioned geothermal plants in the south, places that might have survived. If we can reach them, if we can establish contact. That's thousands of kilometers, Hannah objected. Through frozen wasteland. We'd lose people. Maybe. But if we stay here, we lose everyone eventually. We debated for hours. No clear answer emerged. Then Yijin spoke up. What if there's another option? Yijin had been quiet since joining us, observing, learning. But she'd also been exploring, sneaking into restricted areas of the bunker, reading old military files, piecing together information. There's something here, she said. Something the military built during the Cold War. A project. They called it the warmth. What kind of project? Geothermal, but different.
Deeper.
They were trying to tap into the Earth's core, not for power, for heat. Enough heat to warm entire cities. She spread papers across the table. It was abandoned when the Cold War ended, but the infrastructure might still exist. And if we could activate it, we could warm the surface. Sergeant Kim's eyes widened. Not everywhere, but enough. Enough to grow food again. Enough to survive. It was insane. Impossible. Exactly the kind of hope we needed. We planned for weeks. The warmth facility was located hundreds of kilometers south, in a region now buried under ice. Getting there would require a team of our strongest, bravest, most capable people. Getting back would require even more. I volunteered immediately. No, Hannah said. You're needed here. Minji needs me here, I countered. But the future needs me there. I remember things, locations, dangers, survival techniques that could make the difference between success and failure. Sergeant Kim made the final call. I would go. Hannah would stay and lead the bunker in his absence. Minji would be cared for by my parents and the community. The night before departure, Minji crawled into my bunk one last time. Appa, don't go. Her voice was small, scared. The cold will get you. I'll be careful. I'll wear all my layers. I'll come back. I held her tight. I promised I'd never let you be cold again. I'm keeping that promise by making sure no one is ever cold again.
She didn't understand.
But she hugged me anyway, and I hugged her back, and we stayed like that until morning. The expedition was 6 people. Me, Sergeant Kim, 3 military veterans from our group, and Yi Jin, who'd found the files and insisted on coming. We traveled by modified snow vehicles, designed for extreme cold, moving slowly across the frozen landscape. Days blurred together. White sky, white ground, endless white. Temperatures stayed around -90 degrees Celsius. Every breath hurt. Every moment outside was a battle. We passed through frozen cities, their towers like skeletal fingers reaching for a sun that never warmed. We passed bodies frozen in place, preserved like terrible statues. We passed signs of other survivors, campfires long dead, shelters long abandoned, but saw no one living. On day 12, we found the facility. The warmth was everything Eugene promised and more. A complex of buildings buried under ice, accessible through tunnels the military had blasted decades ago. Geothermal equipment, outdated but intact. Control rooms with manuals and schematics and hope. We need to restart the core, Eugene said, studying the manuals. It's been dormant for decades, but the basic systems should still function. If we can get power to the pumps. We have portable generators, Sergeant Kim said. Enough to jumpstart the system? Maybe. But someone has to go down. To the geothermal vents. To manually engage the failsafe. Down meant deep underground. Into areas that might be unstable, might be flooded, might be anything. It was dangerous. Possibly suicidal. I volunteered. You've done enough, Sergeant Kim said. Let someone else. I remember dying. I met his eyes. I remember cold, so deep it stopped my heart. If I can prevent anyone else from feeling that, I'm going to. Let me do this. He nodded slowly. Go. The descent took hours. Down ancient elevators, then ladders, then passages so narrow, I had to crawl. The temperature rose as I descended, warm at first, then hot, then almost unbearable. Sweat froze on my skin in the cold sections, then melted in the warm, creating a constant battle against my own body. Finally, I reached the core. A chamber of metal and stone, filled with machinery that hummed with dormant power. In the center, a massive valve, the failsafe Eugene had described. Turn it, and the geothermal flow would restart. Heat would rise. The facility would awaken. I approached the valve, grabbed the wheel, pulled. It didn't move. I pulled harder, braced my feet against the metal floor, threw all my weight into it. Nothing. For a terrible moment, I thought I'd failed. Come all this way, survived the freeze, survived the journey, only to be stopped by a rusted valve. Then I remembered something Hannah had said weeks ago. Asterisk, you can't do everything alone. That's why we're a community. Asterisk. I wasn't alone. I radioed the surface, explained the situation. Within hours, the others joined me. All 6 of us, pulling together, combining our strength. The valve turned. The effect was immediate. A deep rumble shook the chamber. Machinery groaned to life. Lights flickered on, actual lights, powered by actual electricity. Heat radiated from the core, warm and growing warmer. We'd done it. We'd awakened the warmth. Returning to the surface took hours. By the time we emerged, the facility had transformed. Ice melted from buildings. Steam rose from vents. For the first time in months, I saw water, liquid water, dripping from structures that had been frozen solid. It's working, Eugene breathed. It's actually working. Sergeant Kim grabbed my shoulder. You did it. All of you. You saved us. But we weren't done yet. The warmth could heat this facility, maybe the surrounding area. But our people were hundreds of kilometers away, still huddled in the bunker, still waiting for hope. We needed to bring them here. Communicating with the bunker took days. Our radios barely reached that far, and conditions kept interfering. But eventually, we got through. Hannah's voice crackled over the speaker, weak but unmistakable. You're alive. You're actually alive. We're alive. And we found it. The warmth. It's real, Hannah. It works. Silence. Then, we're coming. All of us. However long it takes. The migration took weeks. Over 100 people traveling across frozen wasteland in modified vehicles, following the route we'd marked. Some didn't make it. The cold claimed them, or accidents, or simple exhaustion. But most did. Minji arrived in the 3rd wave, wrapped in so many layers I barely recognized her. When she saw me, she ran, slipping on ice, stumbling, falling, and I ran too, catching her, holding her, crying. You came back, she whispered. You promised and you came back. I always keep my promises. The warmth transformed everything. Within months, the facility became a true settlement. Buildings thawed and were repaired. Greenhouses sprouted food in warm soil. Children played outside, outside, for the first time in over a year. We established a council to govern. Sergeant Kim for security, Hannah for logistics, Eugene for technology, me for? I don't know. Memory, maybe.
Hope.
Mr. Park, the grieving father who'd hated us, eventually softened. He'd lost his wife, but found purpose in helping others. He never apologized, but he didn't need to. Actions spoke louder. And Minji? Minji grew. Slowly, carefully, she became a normal child again, laughing, playing, asking questions that had nothing to do with cold or death or dying. The nightmares faded to distant memory. Sometimes, late at night, she'd still crawl into my bunk and press cold feet against my legs. Appa, she'd whisper, tell me the story again. The one where we survive. And I'd tell her. Every time. We never fully understood why some of us returned. Scientists among the survivors studied the phenomenon, but the freeze had destroyed so much knowledge. Theories emerged: cosmic alignment, quantum entanglement, divine intervention. None were proven. What we knew, there were hundreds of us, maybe thousands, scattered across what remained of the world. We carried memories of death and used them to build life. We called ourselves the returnees. Not proudly, it was just a fact, like having brown hair or being left-handed. Something we were, not something we chose. And slowly, we started reaching out. Radio signals. Scout expeditions. A network of survivors, connected by impossible experience. The world was still frozen. Still dangerous. Still uncertain. But it was also alive. Growing. Hopeful. 5 years after the freeze, the warmth settlement had grown into a city. Not a big city, a few thousand people, carefully organized, sustainably managed. But a city nonetheless. With schools and hospitals and farms and homes. With children who'd never known the old world, but were learning to build a new one. I was 22 now. Hannah was 23, and we'd built something together. Not romance, exactly, but something deeper.
Partnership.
Understanding. The bond of people who died together and come back together and built a world together. Minji was 12. Taller. Stronger. She still crawled into my bunk sometimes, but less often now. She had friends her own age, interests of her own, a life separate from mine. That was good. That was exactly what I'd fought for. One night, we sat on a hill overlooking the city, me, Hannah, Minji. The sky was clear for once, stars visible through the thin atmosphere. Below us, lights twinkled from homes and businesses and all the ordinary things that made life worth living. Appa, Minji said quietly, do you ever think about before? The other timeline? I considered lying. Decided against it. Sometimes. Less than I used to. Do you think about me? She stopped. When you died. I put my arm around her.
Yes.
But I also think about you now.
Alive.
Here. With me.
She leaned into me.
I'm glad you came back, Appa. I'm glad we both came back. Hannah smiled from my other side. We're all glad. We sat there, 3 survivors of an impossible past, watching lights twinkle in a frozen world that was slowly thawing. The freeze had taken everything, but it hadn't taken us.
And that was enough.
Asterisk, my name is Park Jinho. I was 17 when the freeze killed me the first time. I was 17 when I came back. I'm 22 now, writing this in a world that's still frozen but slowly healing. Asterisk. Asterisk, if you're reading this, you're probably a returnee too. Or someone who found these records and wondered if they're real.
They are.
We are, asterisk. Asterisk, the freeze changed everything. But it didn't end everything. We're still here. We're still fighting. We're still building. Asterisk. Asterisk, come find us. The Warmth Settlement. We have food, shelter, community. We have hope. Asterisk. Asterisk, and if you can't find us, build your own hope. Wherever you are, whatever you're facing. Asterisk. Asterisk, because we survived. All of us, together. Asterisk. You can too. Jinho.